All right, what does pop culture, education, and the black market have to do with saving the country? And why are we even asking that question? Well, there's a tweet that went out from Congressman Thomas Massie, who's a guy we really respect around here, and he actually said that he didn't think the country could be saved, but he was here just in case. Well, I do think the country can be saved. And what's amazing is I don't think it's going to be saved by voting harder. Don't get me wrong, I think voting's important. I think politics is meaningful, but there's a lot of things that we can do as Americans, as men, as women, husbands, fathers, that I think are actually far more relevant to saving the country. And we're actually going to go through 3 categories today where we discuss just that. So all of that and more coming up on this episode of Making the Argument.
Thank you all for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, we would love for you to become a member of our community chat. We have so many very cool things going on over there, and you can join by going down to the link in the description right now.
Now, if you're watching this video right now and you're feeling a little bit betrayed because my luxurious beard is nowhere to be found, well, we're going to explain that. But don't worry, I am still your host of Making the Argument, Nick Freitas, and still with us in the studio, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone.
And then, of course, we have our resident historian and political prognosticator, Christian Hines.
Hello.
And then back with us, we have our producer of producers, Nicholas Hamilton, the good Hamilton, the one that doesn't like central banking. How you doing, Hamilton?
I'm doing very well. And speaking of not having the beard anymore, Nick, I believe we have a new partner on the show. Is that right?
We do have a new partner. Now, listen, for any of you that have been listening for a while, watching for a while, you know that there was something of a debate going on whether or not I shaved the beard for my oldest daughter's wedding. Well, we did end up making that decision, but not before some good friends of ours called us up and said, Nick, we think our values align, and if you're going to shave that beard, well, then we want to make sure you do it properly. So we're going to go ahead and show you a quick video to explain what exactly happened with the beard. Christian, would you mind playing that now?
Yes.
The beard has to go.
Daddy, it's for my wedding.
Get it over with.
Was it worth it?
Yeah, it was worth it.
Here, try this.
Hey, babe. It works. Thanks, Jeremy.
All right. So we took you. I love about this ad that you caught me ugly crying with my daughter during the father of the bride dance.
I thought that was special. I loved it. As soon as they put that edit in, I went, yeah, keep it. Please keep it. That was beautiful.
So here's what you got to understand about this wedding, right? Like, I did not want to shave my beard, but Lily wanted me to wear my dress blues, and you really should be clean shaven when you wear your blues. So we did that. But honestly, it was super cool for Daily Wire, Jeremy's Razors, to call us up and said, hey, we love your content. We love the stuff you guys have done. And if you're going to shave the beard, we think we might have some potential for collaboration here.
Yeah. So
we sent that video in, and it's already been out, but we wanted to show for you all here. I was so proud of myself because it was an emotional day. Like, I really got to hand it to our photographer, Chris Frost. I mean, he got me with the first look where the father gets to go in and see his daughter in her wedding dress for the first time. It was also Tina's wedding dress. And like we had told people, the last time those dress blues and that wedding dress were in a church together, Tina and I were getting married.
Yeah.
So I choked up a little bit at that. I held it together when I walked her down the aisle. I choked up a little bit during when she was saying she was saying her vows. I choked up a little bit when I was giving my father the bride speech. But when we did the daddy-daughter dance, I knew it was either going to be Butterfly Kisses or Cinderella. I knew it was going to be one of the two, so I'd mentally prepared for that. What I didn't mentally prepare for is when it came on, Lily looked at me and she goes, Daddy, I requested this song, and we danced to this song to every daddy-daughter dance we ever went to because I knew I was going to play it for this moment. You did a great job, Dad. I lost it. I lost it. Like head and her shoulder. Like I ugly cried. I ugly cried. She got me with that. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell Jeremy's Razors. Thank you very much for sponsoring that. And not only did they sponsor that ad, but they've got some deals going on, and we're doing a little work with them here on the podcast, which we're really excited about, because one of the things that we have always told our audience, and this is true with the other things that we've done products with, we don't do deals with people that just happen to agree with us when it comes to political philosophy. If you're going to produce a product, we expect the product to be good. Right? People that just say, "Oh, buy our product because you know what I call it? I call it using the flag to sell what your wares." Right? And Jeremy's Razors doesn't do that. They do have a very good product, because I can tell you right now, when you were going through that much facial hair, you want a razor that's actually going to get the job done. And their newest razor is pretty epic. I gotta say, the other thing I really loved was the shaving cream. I like a shaving cream that smells kind of like that fresh.
Oh, it smells awesome.
Oh my gosh, it was good. You can almost use it as just like cologne. But it was good. It worked really well. So the razor was kicking. Razor was great. The shaving cream was great. And as you can see, I'm already starting to grow back the beard, although Tina might have something to say with that. Tina kind of likes the beard shaved, so she might be giving Jeremy some more
I might be giving Jeremy's more business if I can convince Nick to keep it clean shaven.
To keep it clean shaven.
I like his face. I don't think it should be covered up.
Well, but I got to tell you, the other thing I like about it is, a dude, I don't particularly like to shop. And so I like it when I've got one-stop shop, so I can get my shaving cream there. I can get the razors there. I can get they've got soaps, they've got deodorants. So I get all the stuff that I need through Jeremy's, which is great because they do align, and that's what I look for. I do want more and more. We want to do business with people that actually share our values, that are not trashing what we believe. I think Jeremy's does a good job of representing that. Plus, they have an excellent product. And then when you take all of that into account, they've also got good beard products. So whether I stay clean shaven or I go back to the luxurious beard, Jeremy's has got me covered both ways. They've also got like the little comb and the brush for the beard too, which is super comfortable, because grooming's important. That's right, fellas. If you want your ladies to love you, show up clean. Whether it's clean shaven or with a luxurious beard, it needs to be clean either way. So Jeremy's Razor. Go to Jeremy's Razor.com. Use promo code Nick, and you can get 15% off your purchase. So go give it a try. All right.
If any of our audio listeners were not able to watch the video we just played, I'll leave a link down in the description. You can watch it there.
Okay, let's go ahead and get on to a topic that I know everybody over at Daily Wine Jeremy's is also concerned about. That's, how do we take back the culture? Can we win back the culture? And what is it going to take to actually do that? Because again, a lot of times when we talk about saving the country, it's always geared toward politics, right? Well, we got to elect this guy, or we got to elect that person, or we got to win this legislative battle, or show up to the school board. And you know what? All those can be important. But today, we don't really want to focus on the political side, right? Because I get very frustrated when people spend so much time focusing on the political that they actually forget about the things that they have way more control over, to include some things that you probably don't think you have as much control over as you do. And when we get into the pop culture and arts and entertainment side, we're going to give you a couple of tricks where you can send a message in ways that you didn't think possible. But the first thing we're going to talk about, which I've always said is ever since I became a delegate, people would ask me, like, what is your most important issue? And I said, it's really difficult to talk about, like, what is the most important issue? Because obviously I think individual liberty is very important. I think free markets are important. I think your gun rights and your ability to protect yourself are important. I think protecting innocent human life is really important. I said, but if I had to pick something that I thought affects all of those other things, and that I'm in a position within government to be able to help affect, it would be education. right? It would be education reform. And so I've always talked about that from the standpoint of school choice or vouchers or education savings accounts. I've always been kind of an all hands on deck, like anything that puts more power into the hands of parents and less power into the hands of politicians when it comes to education, I'm willing to work with. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Having served 9 years in the Virginia General Assembly, having been the subcommittee chairman for higher education, having served on the education committee now, I'm just going to tell you, if you really want, if your goal is to save government-run schools, which is commonly referred to as public schools, but I call them government-run because that is a far more accurate description of what they are. Right? It is a government-run school. They are government employees. It's government-approved curriculum. It's government. That's what it is. I'm going to tell you right now, that is a decades-long fight. And the question that you're going to have to ask yourself is, while you're fighting to save it, do you want your kids in it? Because I believe that even with parents becoming more aware of what's going on and even with them fighting back, one of the biggest problems that parents need to understand about your government-run schools is that the vast majority, there's a lot of great teachers out there. Let me just caveat this. I'm not attacking teaching. I'm not attacking teachers. But what I am saying is that every single one of your teachers in your public school and your government-run school, right, they had to go to college. They typically go through a master's program. Now, I want you to consider higher education, the status of higher education, the state of higher education in this country right now. Do you think your teachers, let's say they went in there, more conservative or just neutral, do you think the vast majority of your teachers went through a conservative, battery of courses to become a teacher, to get their education degree?
I don't think there is such a thing.
I think there is at like Hillsdale College or maybe Liberty University or maybe Grove City College.
You can count them on one hand. Maybe two.
Maybe two.
Compare that to the hundreds of universities out there. We did a podcast a couple months ago where we talked about the university system. This was particularly when you had like all the Gaza protests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we went through some of the departments, the ideological composition of some of those departments. And it really reminded me of a quote from Thomas Sowell that's like, the next time somebody tells you how important diversity is, ask them about the ideological diversity of their sociology department.
Yeah.
And the reason why he would say this is because in most of these universities, the ideological composition, especially within the humanities, you're talking in some cases 100 to 1 on the liberal side. And in the case of Harvard, it's half of the faculty identify as very liberal, not even liberal, not even, Tulsi Gabbard, Dave Rubin type liberal, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren type liberal. Leftist is the best way to describe it. Half of the faculty, compare that to 1% of the faculty identify as conservative.
No, and there's, so let's take Harvard. We'll take Harvard as an example. But we could do the same numbers with pretty much most of your state universities or things like that. So let's just say on average, Harvard's like 3% that identify as conservative out of their entire faculty, right? So let's take maybe like a UVA or we can take like a Virginia Tech. It's probably going to be at least 70% of your faculty, identifies on the left. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, then my kid's got a 30% chance if they go for an education degree of getting a more conservative professor. No, because the 30% of conservative professors, almost none of them are serving in the education department. Almost none of them are serving in the liberal arts or humanities. They might be in engineering. They might be in the heavy sciences. They might be in some of the economics, but they are not serving in English. They're not serving in education.
None of your required classes.
They're not serving in that, which means that what you have to understand is that every single one of your teachers, regardless of what their individual belief systems were going into higher ed, essentially went through a minimum of 4 and more than likely 6 to 7 years of very hardcore left-leaning education. And so even if you think, well, I got a good school board, or I got a good state legislature, or I've got a good governor, or whatever it is, even if you think that, the people on the front lines of the education system were all made to go through, because again, all of the government schools require you to have certain levels of education to even teach and then to promote certifications. And what we saw in Virginia when Democrats took control for 2 years was that the requirements they had for them to renew their certification was incredibly far left-wing indoctrination. They tried to claim it wasn't. They tried to claim we were being ridiculous. And then I brought the receipts to a debate. I said, okay, here you go. Here's the requirement. Here's what they did. Here's where they recommended teachers go in order to get additional curriculum for their classroom that would never show up on the curriculum they send home with your child, right? And here's where they went. And it was all extremely left-wing, ideologically driven organizations and institutions. And so what I want parents to understand is that it doesn't mean that I'm claiming that every single teacher is a far left-wing activist. I'm not saying every administrator or principal or every school. That's not what I'm saying. But if I told you in any other realm of your world that at a minimum, 70% of the people would have to go through an incredibly left-wing ideological, focused course and battery of tests and classes and reading, required reading and everything else. And then when they got in there was still a high degree of probability that if they went to continue their education, went through additional certification, it would still have a left-wing bent. Would you honestly tell me, oh, well, that's not going to have any impact on the curriculum. That's not going to have any impact on the way subjects are taught. That's not going to be, and I know this is garbage because I looked at a liberal and I said, oh, okay, great. Well, then you wouldn't mind it if the Catholic Church took over all the ethics training for teachers, right? You wouldn't mind that. You would then come to the conclusion that Catholicism hadn't worked its way into any of the curriculum because it's not officially there. You wouldn't come to the conclusion that Catholicism would affect the ethics training of the people that were receiving the training if it was taught exclusively by Catholic priests, right?
And we've talked about before how Marxism in the classical formulation, yes, it's a materialistic, economically driven philosophy, right? Yeah. But the framework of Marxism, which is ultimately built upon an oppressed-oppressor dynamic, can be applied in a multitude of different ways, many of which have nothing to do with economics or historical materialism or any of those, any of the economic or academic buzzwords that Marx himself used when he wrote Das Kapital with Friedrich Engels, in some other works as well. The problem is the cultural components of Marxism, right? And so it's, if you say like, well, this is all pushing a certain ideology, and the pushback is going to be, that's not happening. Nobody's pushing Marxism. You're right. Nobody's saying seize the means of production and economic progress is the only thing that determines history, but everybody is using the framework that Marx wrote about, and they're applying it in different contexts in order to push what we call cultural Marxism. And yes, if you're going to say that's not happening, as you pointed out earlier, you have the receipts of how that's happening. Yeah. And for those that think that, well, it's not like there's some conspiracy at play here. It can't be that every single teacher is all just in on some scheme to push this ideology. Another YouTuber, Mentis Wave, put out a video several months back talking about this. And I like the way that he formulated this. He said, there's this process within biology where you have two species that are unrelated to each other, but because of the environment that they're in, they adapt in the same way to the circumstances. And so the example that he uses is that you have a lot of species that kind of look like or operate like crabs, even though they're not crabs. And then he goes on to say what we currently have within things like academia and the media, for that matter, is the same thing. We have incentive structures that are incentivizing people to operate like woke crabs, is the way that he described it. Yeah. And the point that he's getting across is not that every single person that's going into these fields is an ideologue. It's not like every single person has written Das Kapital or anything like that, right? But what's happened is that they're being incentivized to act and perform and regurgitate a bunch of buzzwords and phrases. And some of them don't, but a lot of them do because the pressure is so immense that you get the whole crabification, and what he calls woke crabs.
They have given everyone the same lens to look through. Yeah. So even if this person's not an ideologue, they're looking through an ideological lens. And so it's not their fault. They're just handed this by the education system and said, this is how you're to approach everything. Yeah. Well, and so what you end up with is people that don't even realize that they are a tool of the ideology.
Or even if they do, it doesn't matter, because if the school system has come down and said you would better use this or you would better do this, well, then they're going to feel an obligation to do so.
The best they can do is fly under the radar as much as possible. But
Yeah.
they all get found out and they all get taken down. I mean, it's crazy how many people are getting pulled out and talked to and things like that because they don't walk the line exactly perfect.
Well, and again, the argument always is, well, we're just bringing in experts to talk about these various things. I said, oh, okay, well, you agree that like gun violence is a problem. Like, yes. Okay, good. Then here's what we'll do. We'll have the NRA come into the schools and teach gun safety, because they are experts on gun safety. They've been running hunter safety programs for years. So we'll have the NRA come in and do that. And you're okay with that, right? Of course they're not okay with that. Like, oh, you can have the NRA. It's ideologically driven. Oh, and the NEA isn't? The National Education Association is not ideologically driven? Like, this is the sort of thing where people need to kind of wake up to the fact that even if you get a good school board, even if you get a different legislator, even if you get a different governor, right? If the whole system within the walls of education is set up to achieve certain end states, it takes a very strong teacher to push back against those influences and potentially give up things with respect to their career in order to say, I'm just here to educate. I just want them to be able to read, to be able to write, to be able to do math, to be able to think critically, right? When everybody's pushing like, no, there's a certain worldview that we also want to come through in what we do. And then they pretend that worldview is ideologically neutral when it is not. And so again, what I want everyone to understand as we talk about this is not just the problems within the public school system, the government-run school system, and the natural incentives that have been set up over decades that you are not changing overnight. You are not changing it overnight. Here's what I want people to also understand, though. This is actually a huge Achilles heel for the left. It's a huge Achilles heel for the left.
How?
Because even with all of the effort to control higher ed, to now make all the inroads they've done in controlling government education, you still have the ability to pull your kids out of it. You still have the ability, but there is a reason why, and I promise you this, if we started to see, we saw one uptick during COVID where people started to pull their kids out and then they didn't put them back in. If you start to see another big exodus of kids from the public school system, I promise you, the bluer the state, the more they will fight to end homeschool and to also put more restrictions on private schools. They have to have, we don't need the public education system. This is one thing that I need parents to understand. We do not need the government education system to either educate our children or to protect our values, right? They do. And the reason why is they don't have enough kids.
Yeah, they kill them all.
They don't.
Okay.
They don't have enough.
Them,
they don't have enough kids. They don't have enough kids to be able to maintain the voting numbers they need to be successful long term. They just don't, which means they need somebody else's children to educate. It
requires that they co-opt your kids.
There is a reason why they both are insistent on parents' tax dollars only being used to one venue, and it's the venue they happen to control, which means the moment you pull your kid out, they start to throw a fit. The moment a legislator says, well, listen, if the objective is for the public to be educated, there's any number of ways we can do that. It doesn't have to be this system. And like, no. We want this system. This is the system. We want to make you pay for it, and we want to make you go to it unless you can afford an alternative. That's essentially what they're saying. What you should be realizing is that the reason why they're fighting so hard for this is not because they're so desperate for every child to be educated. They are so desperate for every child to be educated a certain way. So the moment you pull your kid out of that, whether it's private school, whether it's homeschool, whether it's some sort of co-op, whatever it is, there's a reason why that terrifies them. And it's not because they're worried about, floundering literacy rates. So what I would ask every parent to consider, because this is something that we're actually talking, I don't want to reveal too much, but this is something that we're actually talking about diving into a lot more on our community side with providing resources. One of the main questions that we've been asking parents is, what would it take if you are inclined to leave? Now, listen, if you love the school that your kids are going to, you think your teachers are great, and maybe that's the case. Maybe they are, right? There are plenty of schools, plenty of teachers like that. But if you're like, no, I'm concerned. I'm genuinely concerned about what is going on within my school, and I want an option outside of what the government has given me. Go to our community notes page. I've started a discussion on there over in Circle. I've started a discussion on there, and what would it take? What are the things that are holding you back? A lot of people, it's money, it's financial, it might be time. A lot of parents have been convinced that they don't possess the requisite education or knowledge or expertise to educate their children.
Another one is sports, extracurriculars.
Yeah, extracurricular or various courses that are available. So that's what we're looking for is if you are inclined to remove your kids from this environment, like you've become convinced that, yeah, we know that there's problems and we know it's going to be really hard to fix those problems, but how do we fix them? Let us know, because in the comments here on YouTube, that's one of the areas that we want to dedicate some special episodes to, because I am promising you there are far more resources out there than you think. And a lot of the effort that has been made to convince you that you are not capable of educating your children has not been done because you lack the ability. It has been done to convince you not to pull them out. And that's the part you have to really, really think about. Why? Why would people be trying to convince you that you're an otherwise smart person? Let me put it this way. If the same education system that educated you didn't do a good enough job for you to be able to teach your 5-year-old how to read, maybe you should listen a little bit less to the education system that's telling you you don't have the capability, because I think that's ridiculous. All right, we're going to move on to our second topic right here, and this has to do with pop culture. And we've talked before about the whole idea of taking back institutions or replacing those institutions. And Hollywood, we had a great episode with Nerdrotic. I really encourage you to go check out that conversation with Gary over at Nerdrotic. And one of the things Gary talked about was, he's like, Nick, once upon a time, if you wanted to have a good movie, if you wanted to have a good sitcom, if you wanted to have good entertainment, you needed a massive Hollywood studio. You needed the cameras, you needed the infrastructure, you needed the writers. He goes, a combination of AI, good phones or good cameras, and just how horrible Hollywood has gotten is driving people toward alternate forms of entertainment. And you know what? He's right. If you ask me, how much time have I spent watching Disney in the last year versus how much time I've watched Nerdrotic's channel trashing Disney in the last year, I've watched hours of Nerdrotic. Why? It's informative. It's entertaining. I enjoy it. I know he's not going to crap all over my values. And I love the fact that they're getting so furious that this guy, his channel has exploded. Why? Because he's doing a good job. And so we actually have this huge opportunity right now where we have people that don't have access to the studios, but with a little bit of video editing software, with some talent, with good story writing, they can actually create something that people want to watch, want to listen to. And again, we know that sometimes YouTube shuts people down, but I'm also going to tell everybody else something else. Yes, work with organizations like Rumble, work with other groups like Socials and stuff like that. But we get a lot of watch time on YouTube. And we say a lot of things that we know the execs at YouTube don't like. But a lot of these organizations, especially after Elon Musk bought Twitter, kind of learned that we got to chill out on how much we censor people, because not only is it bad for our bottom line, but people are getting furious and competition is going to come in and eat our lunch if we don't allow these voices to be heard. And so the first thing I would tell people is, hey, are you funny, right? Like, are you creative? Are you talented? Don't automatically think that you got to go right for Hollywood, especially if they're trashing your values, right? I look at things like Freedom Tunes, right? There's a ton of content out there. I look at things like the Tuttle Twins. There's a ton of content out there that is well done. It's entertaining, and it's made available by, groups like Angel Studios. If you like theater, there's organizations like Sight and Sound. But there's a ton you can do with your own camera, with your friends, that you can put on YouTube, that you will be shocked on the number of watch hours that you're going to get, as long as it's well done.
I love the fact that it seems like Hollywood is just being flushed right down the drain.
They're flushing themselves.
They're dying.
I love the fact that, like, okay, you don't need to be this high dollar actor or actress anymore. People are creating their own content. And let me just say, your average person is a whole lot more funny than all these people that no longer know how to do comedy in Hollywood. It's like the the comedy is either gross trash humor that's disgusting toilet humor, or it's really, really woke now and it's not even funny. Like they're like, please clap. It's terrible.
They're only allowed to make fun of one group of people, and it's straight white men.
Yeah.
It's people like Nick and I.
Yeah.
And Hamilton. Let me not.
But like your average person now is putting up content where they're just telling you funny stories from their life, or they're doing funny little sketches or whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are getting our entertainment that way now, and I'm glad for it. I'm happy to not give my money to these Hollywood woke people anymore.
Yeah.
It's not just comedy. So one of my favorite things that I listen to when I listen to your podcast with Gary from Nerdrotic, he brought up first off, if you have not yet listened to that episode, go back into our channel and watch that episode. It is a phenomenal episode. It's one of your best interviews. But one of the things that Gary brought up in there, and he's totally right, is that culture is arguably the most important thing. Or if it's not the most, it might be one step below education.
Yeah.
Because it is from culture that almost everything else spills forth. And I know Andrea's going to get very mad at me, our listener, when I say that, politics is downstream from culture. Her and I actually had a debate on that once. And some of our other listeners have brought up that, and there might also be other forces upstream from culture. And all that's true. But culture plays a central role in the formulation of a society, of a civilization, of a nation, of a group of people. We joke all the time that, there once was a dream that was Rome.
Yeah.
Roman culture is the thing that defined the Republic and later the Empire. And my point is that when you seed the culture, and this is a huge conclusion that Gary brought up, that part of the reason that we have lost on the right is because we totally abandoned the culture. We walked away from it. Or we got gatekeeped out of it. It was a combination of those two things. But the good news is that the left cannot create anything beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. They kick all the conservatives out of architecture schools, and now they're just building everything in brutalist, hideous, ugly designs. They kick everybody out of, creating works of public art, and now it's like every statue is just ugly. Yeah. We don't make anything beautiful. Go look at the way that they designed cities and public art and architecture and paintings and music from 100 years ago. Like Nick and I are both fans of Impressionism, for example, and then compare it to the type of art that's produced today. Now look at the way that things like cinematography is done. Look at the way that TV and films are done. It's the exact same thing. The left can't create anything beautiful. They can just simply destroy that which is beautiful. And so there's a tragedy in there, and that things keep getting worse and degenerate and just hideous and ugly. But the benefit is that people have realized, I don't need to watch ugly things. I don't need to consume stuff that has no plot. And it's not just comedy, it's everything.
It's everything.
Consider Star Wars right now. Acolytes come out and it's being review bombed. It's horrible. It's a bunch of, communist, space lesbians that are undermining Anakin's legacy. And Gary's talking about this. Critical Drinker's been talking about this lately.
He's
Some
like,
other people.
The message. Yeah. It's all about the message.
And it's all about appealing to modern audiences. Well, last I checked, modern audiences actually want a good plot. So it's not just comedy, it's good storytelling. Yes. And you know what? People on the right can tell a good story because we know what motivates mankind to go out there and conquer the wilderness. You give a man a wife, a kid, a country to die for, a God to defend, a system of morals to uphold, and he will go out into the wilderness and he will build civilization. This is what the hero's journey is all about. This is what all the archetypes that people like Jordan Peterson talk about. We have forgotten how to tell stories built around things that we know are eternal truths. And once we get back to that, it's going to be like flicking a light switch on. I'm usually a doomer, but when it comes to the culture, I'm actually more optimistic about this than any other institution.
I think there's a huge opportunity for a lot of creative people out there. And look, understand something. This is also where we make the distinction between liberals and leftists, right? Because liberals, there's a lot of creativity when it comes to, liberally minded people. The question is, it's this leftist woke idea where everything is a power struggle. Everything is oppressor and oppressed. And nothing can go forward without advancing that cause, whatever it might be in that given moment. And so much of it is built around this idea of tearing down that was, right? And replacing it with this new version. And I think one of the things to understand about this is that they really brought in this whole idea of like, well, all beauty, all aesthetics are just the eye of the beholder, or, cultural institutions which push a particular narrative. And guess what? It's not true. It is not true. There are things that are just aesthetically beautiful. And it doesn't mean that people can't have different preferences or different tastes, but more and more what that's been translated into is that we're going to take things that are obviously ugly and we're going to force you to say that they're beautiful. We're going to force you to say that they're pleasing, and they're not. And the more people are forced to kind of regurgitate this, the more it actually turns into almost like a sickness. And this is why I think you have such a huge mental health crisis, especially with those, the more on the left they identify, the more the health crisis seems to increase. It's because they're being told to reject everything that their mind and their eyes and their, tells them is true, because no, that's evil and that's patriarchal and that's oppressive, and we have to tear that down. And once we tear it all down, then we can get to the real beauty. And the more they tear it down, the worse off they are. Here's the other thing I want to tell people on pop culture too, because obviously there's the competitive side, right? There's creating our own art to compete with it. But there's another element here that I don't think people fully realize how powerful they can be when it comes to viewing things. One of the things that we've seen with things like Acolyte, right? Acolyte gets like 85% approval from critics, right? The professional critic band, right? It's got a 15% approval from the audience. And this is one of the reasons why. And then what do they do when the critics and the studios don't like it? They attack the fans.
They turn off the comments.
Yeah, they turn off the comments. They attack people like Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker and say, oh, it's just these toxic people. It's funny. 3 years ago, nobody cares what, Nerdrotic thinks. Now it's like, well, Nerdrotic's the reason why this is going the way it is. Like, no, it's because your product sucks. He just does a really good job of explaining why it sucks.
Yeah.
But here's what I also want to tell people. And we know this now because we have a YouTube channel. We have a fairly successful YouTube channel. And one of the things that we do out of respect for our audience is we go and we will look at the analytics behind our own videos. And we'll look at things like, why did things drop off here? Or why did people leave here? Or why didn't people stay past this particular point? Is there a way
what did Tina say that made everybody turn it off?
Is there something that we can do better? Is the way we can explain things, better? Is there a way that we can make this more entertaining? We're not going to change our values based off of the things that we believe in, but we do want to be more effective. We do want to be respectful of our audience and courteous toward our audience, because without you, we don't get to do what we do. Now, here's what I will tell you, especially with streaming. I don't know how it works for cable. I don't have cable. I haven't had cable for over a decade now. But if you're watching on the internet and you're watching Netflix, or you're watching especially YouTube and things like that.
Amazon Prime, any of those.
But
Hulu.
I would say, I think this is true of Netflix. I think it is true of streaming platforms. I know it is true of YouTube. When you stop watching matters.
They
right?
know.
When you stop watching matters, because some people think, oh, well, I'm gonna watch through the rest of this and then I'm gonna stop watching. Okay. Tina and I have gotten to the point now where when we watch a show, the moment it starts to go super woke, I'm like, you're done.
It's off.
You're done, because I want you to know that was the moment you lost me.
Yeah.
I want you to know. And I don't want there to be any confusion on why you didn't just lose me because I didn't like the way the story ended.
And that takes a ton of discipline on your part, because I know, like, it's the end of the night. We just want to be entertained.
Yeah.
We just want to watch a show. Can we just ignore this so that we can get through the show? And it's like we look at each other and go, no, we've got to turn it off. Like, there's a bunch of stuff about this show that we really want to see how this ends or whatever. Nope, we have to turn it off. We're turning it off.
Yeah.
And it sucks. It sucks when you have to do that. But I want them to get the message, and that's really important to me. And it has to be important to you in order to do that.
They've got a message, so do I, right? And I want them to get it.
Can I ask some questions that are outside the bounds of Hollywood, but still within pop culture? So I briefly brought up other things like architecture and art and music, and I'm just thinking of all the other aspects, literature. There's so many other aspects that go into pop culture. I think we kind of know what the solution is to Hollywood, which is kill it and let it die and burn it and
Let it die.
and replace it with a decentralized system.
But let me just stop you right there. I know you got a bigger point to make, but I don't think it's necessarily kill all of Hollywood, because there are studios in Hollywood that have not been fully embracing this and that have been making movies. Top Gun is a good example. There's been some other ones that came out that were good movies. I don't think it's that you have to kill all of Hollywood. Like, Disney needs to be, like, Disney has just refuses to learn and just keeps shoving it down our throats, and it gets progressively worse each time.
Oh, they're my mortal enemy because they destroyed what is previously my favorite IP of all time.
I have gotten rid of Disney Plus. I got rid of it a long time ago. I will not go to Disneyland. I will not go to Disney World. I will not take a Disney cruise. I will not watch anything associated with Disney. Nothing. Right? I'm actively working to punish them as a result of that. There are other studios where it's like, if you produce a good product, I'll watch it because I want you to know which products work and which ones don't. Right?
Yeah.
So I just want to make that point.
But obviously the problem within pop culture is so much larger than Hollywood. Hollywood is arguably the most important, or one of the most important elements of pop culture that we're fighting on.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff. For example, I've watched a lot of videos, in part because I really enjoy like the 19th century. I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube talking about architecture and the evolving of architecture from, beautiful classical styles or like the Second Empire style. If you go to DC, there's a lot of older buildings, government buildings, unfortunately, that were built, 100 years ago in this beautiful style. And then look at how buildings are constructed today. It's all in this hideous postmodernist style or brutalist style. Like, that's another example of, believe it or not, I would argue that falls under pop culture. These are things where it's like people are growing up and they're just accepting that things are supposed to be ugly around me. No, they're not. Go look at photos of European cities before they were all leveled in World War II. Every single one of them are gorgeous.
I think the other thing, and to that point, right, again, Hollywood gets a lot of the attention, but the art you buy, the books you read, the music you listen to, one of the worst aspects, look, Disney's doing a lot of stuff I absolutely despise. Go look at what some of these most popular artists that your teenage daughters are just listening to, and not just listening to their music, they're listening to their message on everything from abortion to Christianity to everything. And so much of it has gotten, like, this sounds hyperbolic, but it's not. It's gotten demonic. Like, you look at what they're doing and the costumes that they're putting on, and whether
when they're
it's
full-fledged doing demonic, basically recreations of demonic, summonings and stuff in their concerts.
Yeah.
And this is not AI. These are not made up videos.
Yeah.
These are things that are actually happening in some of these concerts. People like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Like, you would never expect. Like, I was just talking to somebody a while back who was like, oh, I just love how Taylor Swift's such a great role model for girls and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, did you not see the latest stuff that's like, are you living under a rock somewhere?
It's like it is, and the thing you need to understand is that even the stuff that's a little bit more subtle, it is listen to the words, listen to the lyrics, listen to the things that they're actually saying on political issues and whatnot. These are people that have influence. And if they're influencing, and especially if your kid is like grown up with them since they were 7 or 8 years old, then they're going to influence them on far more than just, oh, I like this song because it's got a good beat. It's like, that song is conveying a message. Do you agree with the message? Yeah. And then they're getting out there and they're saying things about, they're giving a lot of opinions on what healthy relationships look like. They're giving a lot of opinions on how you should vote. And if you don't think that's influencing your kids, it is. And so I would just say, again, start to take a closer look at the media, the arts, the entertainment out there, and start to look for the alternatives, because there's more and more coming up that are good. They're genuinely good. This used to always be a joke about Christian music and Christian movies, right? It was always like, I'm watching this because it's Christian, not because it's any good, right? And I still get upset with Christian music because I think so much of it is formulaic in a way that is just, it's like, guys, come on. But then there's other people too that get out there and like, I like NF, and NF isn't like blatantly Christian in everything that he does, but there's definitely Christian undertones to it. And there's other music out there that is providing a good alternative. And what I would tell you is, again, don't just reward something because they tell you they're patriotic. Don't just reward something because they tell you they share your worldview or they tell you they share your faith. Reward the people that are doing that and are good, because it's going to send the right signals to the economy and to the industry that this is what we want more of. That's one of the things that Sound of Freedom did well. So anyways, let's move on to our third category here. And this is the one that I find, whenever this comes up, I get excited.
Nick is a big fan of this.
I'm a big fan of the black market, baby. That sounds horrible.
If you ever run for higher office, that's going to be clipped and it's going to be like Nick Freitas.
I will double down. So when I say the black market, what do I mean? Like, obviously I don't mean, heroin and AK-47.
What he means is the free market. He means
What
the
I mean-
free market, which
you
we
might
don't
not
have
mean
anymore.
one of those two things.
What you mean is the free market, because we no longer have a free. You can't have a black market if you have a free
Well,
market.
here's why I point this out. What do I mean by the black market? Like, again, I'm not talking about people engaging in human trafficking, which is horrible and immoral and despicable, and I want these people shut down and imprisoned, if not, killed, right? If you're engaging in human trafficking, there's a lot of bad things that should happen to you, and I would be happy to participate. But the point is this. When I say this, what I mean is we are moving more and more to the sort of economy. We've seen this with the government wanting to take over digital currencies. We see this with the stuff that the government has tried to do, and even some people in the private sector with banking has tried to do. We see this a lot with things like licensure that people don't understand is going on. There is a very cronyist agreement between higher education and government when it comes to keeping people out of the marketplace unless they go to higher education, right? You don't get to tell me that that's not something of a nefarious economic deal that's taking place.
Oh, yeah.
That's not just about making sure people are qualified. That's about making sure that people are getting fed an ideology or they're not allowed to work in entire industries. And so here's what I would tell people. This is what I've told all my kids. As you look at the sort of professional skills that you want to develop, you should be looking for things that are valuable to people and that you can operate off of reputation, quality, and if necessary, under the table. And people, you tell your kids that, you're right. You're dang right I do. Because, and it's not because I want my kids engaging in illegal activities. It's not because I want to engage in illegal activities. But here's what I've seen. The government of Virginia cracks down less on certain illicit drugs than they do raw milk, right? God help you if you try to sell raw milk in Virginia. God help you if you try to sell beef that you raised organically, ethically, slaughtered yourself. And you didn't go through the proper government channels to have all of that inspected? We have it. I'm selling it to my neighbor, and my neighbor knows the processes, and they can come over and look. They can be there while I slaughter it and process it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You haven't gone through our approved processes. We're shutting you down. We're confiscating your stuff, and we're destroying it. Like, they're not even using it, right? We're just destroying it. And the government has done this before on numerous levels, sometimes worse than others. And a lot of people will look at it and say, oh, well, yeah, but I want product safety and I want food safety. Sure you do. We all do. Nobody's questioning that. But when it gets to a point during COVID where now all of a sudden people are shutting down your business or telling you can't show up to work, people have no idea what the Biden administration tried to do. The only reason why they didn't get away with it is because attorney generals like Jason Maris in Virginia, we had a whole episode on this. Joe Biden, through OSHA, tried to make it to where any business that had like 100 employees or more, you had to get the vaccine. Think about that for a second. If you don't get the experimental vaccine, right, that we say you need to take, we're going to take away your ability to provide for your family. If that's not some fascist draconian crap, I don't know what is. And if you're not in a position to be able to do business and provide for your family, when something like that happens, then you're not fully prepared for what could happen because they tried to do it. We're not talking theoreticals here. They tried to do it. I want you to imagine telling somebody in a free country, you're not allowed to feed your kids unless you take the government-approved jab. Screw you, man. You need to be prepared to be able to conduct business, to be able to take care of your family whenever you have somebody that wants to govern in that way. And the fact that it's those sort of people that call me a fascist when all I want to do is live in a free country with a free economy, they're the ones that want to lock people up. That if you don't do what we want, we're going to take away your ability to provide for your family. So that's what I'm saying. When I say learn the sort of skill sets that provide you a mechanism to provide for your family, regardless of what arbitrary decision might come down from some bureaucracy. That's the other part they don't understand. Like, well, oh no, I'll never elect leaders that do X, Y, and Z. I got bad news for you. The bureaucracy is operating under widespread legislation that passed dozens of years ago that they're now creating new rules and regulations because they want you to have to operate the way they tell you to operate. And more, it's not just for OSHA violations. It's not just for, well, we just want you to be safe in the workplace or we want to make sure the food is safe. It's like, no. We're going to be the ones that control what you get. And if you don't like that, fine, we'll shut you down. Oh, no, you're still free. We've just taken away your ability to provide for your family. But don't worry, you can still vote, so I guess you're free, right? No, you're free. You're free when you have the ability to actually provide for yourself and for your family, regardless of some bureaucrat coming in and shutting you down for arbitrary and oftentimes ideological reasons. So what I would tell people is, look, this is something that I think should be happening in churches. This is something that should be happening in homeschool co-ops. This is something that should just be happening within communities. If it's shut down tomorrow, I know where I can get my beef. If it's shut down tomorrow, I know where I can get medical care. If it's shut down tomorrow, I know where I can get electrical work done. I know where I can get these things done. Now, again, insofar as I can operate in a free, open, and legal market, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'll even put up with regulations I don't particularly like, or I think it might be a little bit unfair. But the moment it becomes onerous, the moment they tell my friend, you're not allowed to do business anymore, even though I know they know what they're doing and they do it well, my answer is not going to be screw you to my friend. It's going to be screw you to the government. And I'm giving my friend my business.
This is the whole point of the intentional communities concept.
Yes.
And we're not even talking necessarily about just, oh, we had a pandemic where everything got shut down and now the government's grappling for more control. There are other situations where people have said the wrong things and their bank accounts were frozen. I mean, okay.
Go ask Canadians what they think about the current state of what it is it's anarcho-tyranny. It's a term that I can't remember when it was coined.
But even here in the U.S., like, okay, I'm not a fan of Kanye West. He said some things that were sketchy.
Horrible.
Fine. But why the heck would they shut down, like make it so he doesn't have access to his own accounts? And banks are like, we're not doing business with you anymore. And we're shutting everything down.
Remember when Nigel Farage had his bank account shut down? And he just announced recently that he's running for parliament in their new election that's been called for July 4th. And he might actually win that. But like, because he's too controversial, which is funny because his entire platform is just built around we need to take back our national sovereignty. Apparently that's controversial nowadays. But they tried to debank him. And in Canada, they did debank thousands of people during the trucker protests in 2022. Yeah. This is the term is anarcho-tyranny. Anarcho-tyranny is when, for example, the government will do nothing to stop somebody from ransacking stores and, engaging in grand theft auto and looting businesses and setting them on fire. But if you have a 12-round magazine, you're going to jail. Yeah. If you're Donald Trump, we're going to politically target you. If you were walking between the velvet ropes of the Capitol on the afternoon of January 6th because you thought that you were allowed to be in there, we're going to call you a traitor to democracy and throw you in prison for 5 years. This is the best definition I can give is anarcho-tyranny. It's the idea that the state punishes ruthlessly some actions that, quite frankly, do not deserve to be even a fraction of the amount of retribution that are directed against them. And then they let abject criminality get away without any repercussions whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And then we wonder, like, what's going on? What's really happening is that it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. But it's a twisted, inverted hierarchy. It's an evil hierarchy, actually. Yeah. You're punishing people because we think that they hold the wrong views, and therefore we're going to punish them because you're it's the friend-enemy distinction, right? But then we're going to allow these people to, loot, burn, pillage, again, engage in rampant criminality. Why? Because it suits our end purposes. Yeah. And so when you talk about the black market, what you're doing is that you're basically accepting that, unfortunately, examples of anarcho-tyranny can be found in the US and Canada and the UK and the European Union, but there's workarounds to get around that as part of effectively a form of resistance.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's, and again, I'm not asking, I'll never encourage or sanction somebody doing something wrong or evil. Like that's not me. What I will do is I will say that when somebody decides to arbitrarily shut you down and prevent you from being able to do basic functions that any human being should be able to do in a free society because they say so, or because they've decided you're an ideological enemy, that's the point where it's like, no, you need a workaround. When people say become ungovernable, again, it is the government can't pull off half the things it does without the compliance of its citizens. And the reason why we comply, and the reason why in many cases compliance is a good thing, is because the law is just. It makes sense. Or at the very least, it went through a process that we recognize and can participate in to change if we see a problem with it. But when it starts to become arbitrarily enforced, and not even arbitrarily, when it starts to become targeted toward ideological or political enemies as opposed to equal application of the law or equal justice before the law, that's the part where you have to look at that and say, I'm not going to be governed by this. And if I can't change it through the electoral process, well, then we have a history of peaceful noncompliance in this country. And that's the part where you start to look at it where it's like, I'm not going to be dependent upon a system which can arbitrarily close me out or target me for punishment because I disagree with certain powers that be. That's the sort of resilience we talk a lot about, whether it's making sure you can actually, raise your own garden or keep chickens or whatnot, just anything to make sure that, hey, I'm not completely shut out of being able to feed my family. Or if it's something about just having a network of people that, again, you're not trying to do anything bad or evil or nefarious. You're just trying to make sure that you can take care of one another in a crisis. That crisis might be a tornado. That crisis might be an earthquake. That crisis might be a pandemic. Or that crisis might be a really bad government, right? That's what I'm talking about, is how do you develop the sort of skill sets that are marketable regardless of what the government attempts to do with the economy? Because I can tell you this much, if you know how to do electrical work, if you know how to do plumbing, if you know how to raise food or grow food, if you know how to do a whole host of activities that have value, and you have developed the reputation within your community that you are good at what you do, them taking away your certification doesn't shut you down. And in fact, what we're seeing now is that in too many cases, this is what a lot of college students are recognizing right now. They have the certification. They just don't have the capability or the reputation, and nobody wants to do business with them. Oh, but I have this degree. Oh, but you can't do crap and you're an activist. And that's not what my company needs. So that's what I mean. Develop the sort of skills. Because once you have a skill, again, part of being a free person is being able to live your life, is being able to provide for your family, is being able to do it effectively. And one of the things that's so important about education, skill sets, capabilities, is they can't be taken from you. And more, I think that's going to be incredibly important. So look, want to thank everyone for sticking with us through that. I hope you found this some entertaining and informative. I'm going to do a quick recap here. Again, because we started this off with a Thomas Massey quote on, he doesn't think the country can be saved. And when you talk about certain institutions, cultural or political within this country, that might not be able to be saved, he might be right. But the country is a lot more than just government institutions or even cultural institutions. The country really is the people. It really is the sort of values that we hold. We can rebuild institutions. We can rebuild culturally shaping institutions. We can do all of that, and we don't got to ask permission to do it. We can start to do it right now. And when you look at the education of your children, I am telling you, I think we can win this all in one generation if we just take more control over the education of our children. And yes, that requires some sacrifice and responsibilities, but as someone that has gone through it, I can tell you it can be done, and you will be absolutely shocked by the results. When it comes to things like pop culture, I get very excited because I think there are so many creative people out there that are currently being gate-kept by the current culturally shaping institutions. And there are so many inroads around it now that didn't exist 15 or 20 years ago. Take advantage of them. Don't think that you've got to ask permission from the powers that be in order to be successful within arts and entertainment, whether it be movies or TV, whether it be things like architecture or art or music, right? There's never been a better time to make an end run against all of those gatekeepers. And then finally, when it comes to the black market, again, I'm not talking about doing evil and nefarious things or selling products that you shouldn't be or services that you shouldn't be. I'm talking about things that all of us use on a regular basis that we rely upon in order to make our lives better, but that increasingly the government keeps intervening to make it more and more difficult for good, honest people to just be able to make a living. Develop those skill sets, develop tight-knit communities where, again, I can tell you right now, the government can come in right now and tell certain friends of mine that I've known for a long time, hey, you're no longer allowed to take money in exchange for these goods and services. It ain't going to stop me from paying them for those goods and services. In fact, on some levels, it might even encourage me to do it because I would like to send the government a very strong message that I am a free human being and I intend to be so. So these are three categories that we think everybody can participate in, can develop, can be a part of in a way that makes you more free and ultimately, I think, works to save the country. Because if more people are educating their children, if more people are engaging in culturally shaping actions, whether it be music or arts or entertainment, if more people are developing the sort of capabilities that are resilient regardless of what's going on in the world, those are the key ways in order to not only make sure that you stay free, but pushes back against those institutions and those movements which are trying to make you less free within your government. So that's what we want to encourage everyone to do. That's what we think is open for everyone to be able to do. Take advantage of it while you still can, because if there ever comes a day where they try to make sure that you can't, you want to have the capabilities already. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to our new sponsor, Jeremy's Razors. Go to jeremy'srazors.com, put in promo code Nick to get 15% off that order. Once again, thank you for watching and listening, and we will see you next episode.